Welcome everybody to episode 10 of Destination Unknown. I find myself again in Maine, my old stomping grounds when I was in college, and I am talking to Craig Olson of Craig Olson Books in Belfast, Maine. And this is going to be the wildest trip I've ever been on at a bookstore because Craig has a very interesting way he goes to work every day, which I will show you videos of. But he has to take a ferry to his bookstore and leave his bookstore to go home every day. So without any further ado, Craig, I'm going to have you introduce yourself, explain a little bit about your shop and your business, and then we'll get into the wonderful interview we're about to embark on.
Fabulous. Well, thank you, Max. Thanks for having me. Yes, I have an open shop in Belfast, Maine. This is my second shop actually in Belfast. I had one a number of years ago when I had about 30,000 books in my inventory. And then after selling that down, kind of switched to online only, and then decided I wanted to have a shop again, and the stars kind of aligned. And I had an open shop here now since September of 22. And, my inventory in my shop is pretty general. I try to carry a little bit of everything. I always tell folks when they come in, I want to make sure that everybody can browse for at least 5 minutes and find something that's interesting. But I tend to specialize personally and with my online business more along the lines of art, architecture, photography, and design, and that a little off to the left, national parks. Okay. So that's kind of what I do. Those are my interests, but I have a little bit of everything in the shop. So when folks come in, they can keep themselves busy at least for a little while. And we're a seasonal community. I mean, I'm open year round, and I have traffic all year, but we're definitely a destination spot in New England, right here on the coast in mid-coast Maine and Penobscot Bay.
So you're on an island, though.
Right. I live on an island called Islesboro, which is it's a 12-mile drive for me from the ferry landing in Lincolnville Beach. And it's a 20-minute ferry ride. So I leave my house about 5 after the hour. Ferry runs on the half hour from the island. So most days I'm on the ferry by 8:30, and I'm in my shop here in Belfast by 10 after 9.
So for people though to visit your bookshop or the town, they have to take the ferry to.
No, the shop is on the mainland.
Oh, the shop is
on the mainland in Belfast. My house is on Islesboro. Now, for many years, I had a shop on Islesboro from 2003 until 2016. I had an open shop, and my business was based there up until even my online business until 2022 when I opened this shop.
And you opened up this shop, I think you said in 2022?
Yes, in September. It had been founded. The shop was founded in 2008 by a good friend of mine named George Cisco. And George was actually a retired astrophysicist.
Okay.
I kid you not. MIT PhD, head of the physics department at UCLA. And then he was at Boston University or Boston College as a research professor, and loved my shop on the island. He had a house on the island that he would come to in the summers. Loved my shop. And he said, I was thinking about plunking around in my boat when I retired, but I love your shop. I'd love to do this. And I'm like, knock yourself out first, buy a building, so that you don't have to move 20,000 books or however many, whatever your inventory is, if your lease shifts too much. And so he bought this building that I'm in Belfast, and they renovated the top 2 floors into an apartment. He and his wife, Nancy, also an astrophysicist, both have Wikipedia pages. And they started this bookstore, and he absolutely loved it. And he did it from 2008 until 2022. He died in April of 2022 from lymphoma.
Okay.
And nobody really knew he was sick. He was just this very understated man, but he was really passionate about not just science, but also the humanities. When I bought the inventory of this, after he had passed away, very heavy in science, of course, philosophy, and religion. George was kind of interested in all those things. And he had his shop arranged so that science was on one side and all humanities, religion, fiction was on the other. He said, this is how things are on the science side, and this is why it matters.
I love it. I love that.
Yeah, wonderful man. And he built, a wonderful little business for himself. He said he never had to make money. This was his retirement. He didn't really sell online. And he developed, like most booksellers, if you're there long enough, you develop a clientele. And I still have people who stop in on their way to their cottage or their summer house on their way in the beginning of the summer, and on their way out they'll stop. So that, we're part of their pilgrimage.
How did he source for the store?
George bought, he did both new books and used, and he always said, I am a used bookseller, I'm not a rare bookseller.
Okay.
But he really didn't do much on the rare side. He had some things, mostly material that was his own personal collection. And I think he would buy things, through different catalogs, through independent presses, and people would bring things in. And that was the other reason, other than I missed having an open shop and that interaction with the public. I needed a better way to source materials. When you're living on an island off the coast of Maine, what I didn't want to be doing was simply spending all my time online trolling for books.
Right.
And with having the ferry and with having a young having a family, it was hard to be on the road a lot, sourcing books that way too. So by having a shop, stuff just walks in the door,
Right.
which
And
is fabulous.
you
And
get the phone calls too, come to my house,
absolutely. And the other thing I did is my former business was artisan books and bindery. I also was trained as a bookbinder and had a bindery. But when I kind of morphed and started this new business in Belfast, it became, I wanted to rename it so it's Craig Olson Books, because I wanted people to think of my name when they think of what am I going to do with my books. So it's been pretty nice, and I've had wonderful stuff walk through the door, and house visits constantly.
Are you still binding yourself as well?
I don't. I simply do not have the time,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
it's been a dilemma for many years when I was doing binding, and I have another colleague in Southern Maine who's a binder, and he has a bookstore as well. But for me, it was always, if I was in the bindery, I was worried I wasn't selling books, and if I was selling books, I could think of all the projects in the bindery that I had to do. And there was a time where I had a couple people employed as binders working with me, but it just wasn't worth the time and energy.
Yeah, I recently interviewed Jim Thorne from Thorne Books, and he just made a video for YouTube for me on making a clamshell case.
Oh, nice.
So I have like a 6-part series of Jim
Yeah.
making a clamshell case, which will show up next week sometime.
Oh, excellent. And I used to do a lot of that. I have one client who collects, and I've worked with him for a long time. He collects books into film.
Okay.
And scripts, and specifically for those movies that have won Best Picture. He also had a film noir collection. He also has a lot of all the Japanese, all the Kurosawa and scripts and things like that. And for years, we've made boxes for him,
just for his film scripts.
Right. As we buy thing, and I would often serve as his agent. We would buy something and then we'd also make a box for it. So
how early editions of the film script, because I know those are always photocopied, so how early editions was he collecting?
Oh, he goes all the way back into the 30s with the the first type script, the way they were done. So it's a really interesting area. I'm not a deep expert in scripts. I mean, that's a Kevin Johnson thing at Royal Books in Baltimore. Kevin has actually written a book about the scripts and how to determine, is this the script, what version of it, what's the proper terminology to use, and things like that. So,
and would your client get these signed by the producer, the director?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes. I mean, one of my favorite things is I got to make a box for the script for Giant that was Rock Hudson's copy.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So you just you just never know what's gonna come across threshold. So, and it just wonderful things to see and to handle. I mean, to think of, and I'm a big film fan, but to think that Rock Hudson handled that script, or we had a copy of the script for Cleopatra. It wasn't Elizabeth Taylor's; it was somebody else who was in the production. But the producer had made special bindings for the scripts that had on the spine in leather a depiction of Elizabeth Taylor's Cleopatra, and so it was just amazing to be able to handle some of this.
So who's making his clamshell cases now?
Well, I got a few left. I still have my equipment. So he's my last client other than myself when I need to repair something quick. But I actually have somebody who's interested in buying the equipment. So I don't know. It's gonna be a hard thing to let go of.
That's gonna be tough for you to let that party. That's a chapter of your life.
It is. It is. But sometimes you just need to shift.
So going in 2022, our country was in a little bit of disarray. And I noticed in my own business, which was purely online, that sales skyrocketed during pre-COVID and COVID. Was that impetus for you to get into the shop, or was it more the death of the previous owner?
I had been thinking about it. We lived in the mid-coast area of Maine. So we live near Camden, Maine, Rockport, Maine, Rockland. And, there was a big tourism industry that in the summers. And I was kind of keeping my eye open thinking, well, what if I wanted to do a shop? Would this work? And if you've been in the mid-coast area, Camden, Rockport, Rockland are nuts in the summer. And I thought about that, but this opportunity came up in Belfast, and it just worked out. I'd known George forever. I knew his wife, and she actually wanted, she asked me, well, would you like to buy the building and buy the inventory? And there was no way that I could buy the building.
Right.
But I had some friends that I knew of, and they were interested in buying some property in Belfast, and they ended up buying the building, and they want to keep a bookstore. And so that it's unique. It's wonderful. And the thing about, I had a shop in Belfast about 10 years ago for about a year and a half. And the problem was I had to close it down just financially. It wasn't making a lot of sense. I did some good buying, but I never established that foot traffic. And George had established 14 years of foot traffic. So I was not only buying inventory, I was buying, that express train where people were coming in and people
customer base. They know the phone number.
Absolutely. And, you keep the phone number, honestly, and I haven't taken the time or wanted to spend the money yet, but the old bookstore, Old Professor Bookstore was the name of the bookshop. That sign is still on the top of the building above the door. I've got my signage is in the front windows, but
that's the provenance. You have to keep that.
I know. And if it comes down, it's going to come inside and be displayed inside.
Right.
But, I'm going to cross that bridge when I get to it.
So, sales for you. You have the walk-in shop. I know you are online. You're on Biblio, Abe.
Yeah, I'm on Biblio, Abe. Have my own site, and I do a Libris as well.
But any Amazon or eBay in the marketing?
I used to do Amazon when on my old iteration under Artisan Books, and it did okay, and then it didn't, and I got off, and I tried it here, and quite frankly, I don't know if it's an algorithm issue, if it's the way the data was being migrated, but I had no sales on Amazon. Because I have some mid-levels, some lower end stuff that's nice to move, and I would do that on Amazon. And so I finally just shut it down. And years ago I did eBay a little bit, but I just never had the attention span to keep on it. And the way I work with the folks that do my website, Bibliopolis does my website, when I've got it so that when I upload things to my website, it goes out to these other and distributes to all of these sites. And there is an option for eBay. It's just not something that I've done yet. And not to say that I won't.
Right. Yeah. So what you use a cross listing function to get it all to Abe and Biblio.
Yeah.
And
you just upload it once and then it just distributes.
That's great. How many volumes online do you have about?
Right now, I just looked yesterday. I think I only have about 1,200. And I probably have an inventory now of about probably 4,000 volumes in this shop. There was a point where I had about 30,000 volumes, not all listed online, but and it's just the size of the shop. And I had a call yesterday from somebody who wants me to come and look at a library down south of here, and they're like 2,500 to 3,500 books. I'm like, well, I can certainly come and look. It's not something I'm gonna buy as a bulk purchase because I've got no place to put it. And the last thing I want to do is start storing things other places. I've done that, and then trying to find things if you sell them is, the lesson in disaster.
And so let's go back in time a little bit. How did you get involved initially? Were you a book hunter, a book lover? I mean, how far back does this? I mean, I was
lover.
Yeah, I was an English major in college. I love literature and philosophy, and so I was always in going around New England, going to old bookshops before it was. Before you would make videos about it, in the 80s and 90s. And I just have great memories of a lot of those bookshops. But I know a lot, in interviewing a lot of booksellers, many of them started as book lovers turned book hunters and book collectors.
Yeah, I think that, I'm kind of on that same path, book lover. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Wisconsin on a dairy farm, and little tiny town. and outside of a tiny town. And we didn't really have books in the house. I mean, we would go to the library. And so I fell in love with libraries early on. And I fell in love, honestly, with the bookmobile. They would show up once a
Interesting.
month. And that
Yeah.
was just like the highlight of my month. My mother was a reader, dad, not so much. And so I guess I just fell into books in that way. And then being the first person in our family to go to college, and didn't really have a lot of direction as far as what to do. And so I had aunts and or uncles who were in law enforcement. So I thought I was going to be a lawyer. So I went and got a degree in criminal justice
Okay.
in University of Wisconsin in Platteville. And, kind of followed that for a little bit and did that. I was a private investigator. I worked for the Wisconsin Public Defender's Office as an investigator for a year. But it just never kind of clicked with me like I thought it was going to. And then I happened to work as a security guard, had to pay my rent for the Wisconsin Historical Society, and fell into working there in their exhibits program because I grew up on a farm and I could build things and really enjoyed it, and also had access to the Wisconsin Historical Society library. And so I ended up actually going on and getting a master's degree in history museum studies in upstate New York in Cooperstown, where I met my wife. And I think it comes down to I'm just interested in the hunt. I'm just interested. I'd be the person that would go to the card catalog to look up one book, and then like 10 minutes later I was down some rabbit hole because I looked at this and I'll look at that. And I had full access to the stacks at the Wisconsin Historical Society. I just go browse the stacks.
Right.
And I didn't really know it. And if there was a used bookstore, I would go, but I didn't really think about it as a career.
Yeah.
Or as a path. And then when I was done, I did graduate school, and then spent 10 years running history museums in Southwest Michigan and Western Iowa. We came to Maine. I was a COO of a nonprofit out here because I wanted to work for a private foundation. I'd always worked for state government or local government or community college. And we kind of chose Maine because it was interesting. We weren't so sure about the job. And after about 6 months, we're like, these people are nuts. I don't know if this is going to work out. But we had moved out here, and our youngest was 3 weeks old, 2 and 4.
Okay.
And we just didn't, in the museum world, if you're going to move up, you got to move on. You got to move around. And so we didn't want to do that to our kids, keep pulling them out. And books were in the back of my mind. I always wanted to have my own business. But I didn't really start then. I actually went and trained with a bookbinder instead and started doing.
But isn't it so interesting to me? The more I interview booksellers, we all coveted bookshops. We all spent our free time at bookshops, and it never dawned on us to own a bookshop. And then somehow, some way, metaphysically, a curveball gets thrown into our life.
Yep.
And then we're selling books. But
the stars align.
But it's so obvious. It's so obvious if you go back 20 years.
Oh yeah.
That's where you should have been.
Oh yeah. And I have no regrets. The only thing that the advice that I give new people who are interested in book selling now, my first thing is don't do it the way I did it. And the second thing is, if you can go and work for a bookseller and or apprentice, if you're able to do that. And I had a young family, young kids. I just had to kind of figure it out. And I worked other part-time stuff at the same time. I had a lot of balls in the air. But to get that experience, to gain that experience with someone else's money, and being paid to just handle thousands of books. And so I tell them that, and again, to any of the rare book seminars or anything like that, which I haven't done either. And to the left of me, I can't remember how it's going to come on the screen, but to the right of me is a whole section on booksellers and book-selling memoirs. And honestly, most of those books are mine. I don't need them anymore, but that was my education. I read bookseller memoirs and other things. The unfortunate thing is they're always talking about how great things were, and they were buying truckloads of books, and Jake Zeitlin was doing this, and Lawrence Clark Powell was doing that. But I just kind of muddled along, and I think a lot of us do, because we just love the field. For me, I would love to be a specialist in one specific area, but my brain patterns don't work that way. So I like to know a little about a lot of stuff.
If given that opportunity, would it be national parks?
It could be national parks. It could be Frank Lloyd Wright.
Okay.
I worked at Taliesin when I was his home and studio in Wisconsin. I mean, that's always been a great love of mine. It could be architecture. I don't know if a specific person at national parks. Absolutely. I mean, but again, it's, you know, I'm very envious of folks who have a direct specialty, specifically like folks, you know, there are a couple of the sellers, booksellers out there who do nothing but Churchill.
Right.
But Churchill crosses so many genres. And I think with Frank Lloyd Wright, not so much, but it's still, it's interesting to me. And, you know, and I tend to probably overbuy in art, architecture, and design, just because I love the stuff, and I really like material that's visual, and I've done a lot of fine press material as well. So for me, it's the visual aspect.
So when you're overbuying, as we all do, where's it all going?
Well, it's getting shoved in my art and architecture section, which is getting way too
The
big.
stacks are just getting
Oh
higher.
yeah, it's groaning. So far, no stacks on the floor yet, but I'm just, you never know.
You have your own cityscape of books.
That's, yeah, we're getting there. It's a very thin shop. I think the shop is maybe 15 feet wide and about 40 feet long. So it's
Well, so there isn't, so the price of a book is important if it's going to go on the shelf.
Absolutely. And I tell people, you know, it's all about
space,
shelf rent. It's like, how long is that book going to be on that shelf, you know, sitting there? I mean, you got to turn material. And I used to just, you know, and I think most booksellers go through this. When you're first in the business, you cling to every penny, thinking that, you know, this book is absolutely, I can't get less than $500 for it. Now I'm like, $250, you bet, you know, off the shelf. See ya.
I'm so glad you say that, because I run a Patreon group called Papergold, an ongoing book hunters conversation, and we have over 100 members worldwide who are all internet booksellers learning to grow their business. And I'm always telling them, if you have something priced at 250 and someone offers you 185, you don't have to counter.
No.
Nobody else is giving you $185 today just to hand it to you for a book, and you know how much you have invested in it. And that's one of the things I love about the book market is the ROI on a book.
Yeah.
Especially like you and me as book hunters, I'm sure you're still going to flea markets and things and buying books for $1.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. That is the treasure hunt of what we do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it's,
how often are you doing that still? How often are you?
As much as I can, you know, it's interesting. I'm getting a lot of house visits here now. And, you know, I will tell you, let's see, I had to take a long weekend. We had to go to a graduation, but I think on the Thursday before I left, I had 5 people in within a day selling things. Yesterday, I had one person. But you know, my wife grew up in Tucson, and we went out there for a memorial service a couple weeks ago. And, you know, there's a local chain called Bookman's, which is really quite cool. And they sell all types of books. They have a rare section, but they're always overpriced. But, you know, I pulled a couple of $10 books out that I pulled one $10 book that I've got listed now for 150 because it had a signature and they didn't see it. And, you know, and even though it was new-ish, there was a low print run and it was fairly rare. So, you know, I love the hunt. And people, you go into a shop, and you're probably like this too. People will ask me, what are you looking for? I'm like, you know, I won't know until I see it.
Like, that's not I flip it around. I always say, what do you have? It's easier to ask, tell me what you have.
Yeah.
Because as you know, you're looking for the hard to find, you're looking for the rare, but you and I know what those look like. You don't have to do research. You know, when you see it, you know what it is.
Yep. And you know, a guy was here yesterday. We were talking about, he thought it was somebody else, but I remember it being Leon Rostenberg and Stern, who talked about this in one of their books, and they talked about this made up German term, Fingerspritzen.
Okay.
Like you're in there and you're going through boxes, and you just have this sixth sense that there's something there.
Right.
And I'm like, and I read the book. I'm like, yeah, well, whatever. But it's happened. I've had it happen 2 or 3 times. I'm like, you know, son of a gun.
You know that feeling. I mean,
it only comes with handling thousands of books.
Yeah.
It's not, I wouldn't call it a sixth sense, but the brain works in ways that we don't know. And there's something that clicks, and you're like, oh, there's something significant.
Yeah, and it you know, sometimes for me it could be just not recognizing a small publisher logo on the spine of a book. You know, if it's something I'm aware of, let me see what this is all about. And then you realize, like you
Yeah.
said earlier, it's a small print run, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 books. And now you're holding one of those in your hand.
Yeah.
So it's an
Right.
amazing
Right.
thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, for all of us, it's the hunt.
Mhm. So are you, because I know where you are you going to a lot of the flea markets still in the New England area? Do you go to thrift stores?
No, I haven't been, with having a open shop, it restricts that.
Sure.
I, you know, most of the time I'm here and I'm getting house calls or people
Okay.
are walking in with things. I'm not really doing flea markets. I'll hit a few antique malls once in a while if I'm on my way somewhere, but it's
Mhm.
never a destination. It's if I'm going. I've even had a hard time just getting into other dealers' shops. And it's just because of being a sole proprietor and
Right.
the only person, it's just time is of the essence. So,
Yeah.
but I've had more than enough material offered to me just with house visits and people coming in.
When someone calls and they want you to look at a collection, what I always ask for some pictures if books are on a
Mhm.
shelf. Say, just send me some pictures.
Yeah.
If I can see the spines, we're good.
Yeah.
But what are the key words that you're looking to hear that are going to get you out of the shop to maybe drive 2 hours, or because you're in Maine, you could drive 5 hours and still be in the state.
Right. Right.
So what's going to get you out of the shop to look at something?
Well, I'm hoping they say that when I ask them about paperbacks that they really don't have many.
Okay.
Um, and I'm looking for good quality and I'm looking for histories.
Okay.
And I used to get my ears used to prick up when they said I had a lot of art. They have a lot of art books. That usually will do it for me. And what I like to know is who built the collection or whose collection was it?
Tell me about the collection. Yes.
Tell me about because who did this? So, if it was a college professor, I'm probably going to be there
Mhm.
because it's not going to be so much textbooks, but it's going to be a lot of material, source material, oftentimes primary, not primary, but early editions of things and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Also, could be a lot of exhibition catalogs and
Yes. Yeah.
thin and some monographs, and so you'll
Yeah.
that's an
Yeah. So I,
interesting point.
I did a house visit a couple months ago and he was a retired art teacher, art professor. And he also helped run the library book sale in a local community. And so he understood what he had, which was great. And the art material was really quite good. But what I didn't expect, which was wonderful, is he had a lot of good 20th century fiction signed,
Okay. Oh wow, signed.
which he didn't mention. I'm like, oh, ooh, nice surprise. So I'm like, yeah, you're looking for good quality. I really want to know if it's just somebody who said what I shy away from is somebody that's like, yeah, my husband collected these. He was really into the Civil War,
Mhm.
or he would, or they were a local historian. Doesn't mean that the material is that good. It just means that they
Right.
have a lot of books on history, a lot of book of the month club, things like that,
Yeah.
stuff that's kind of ratty. And I always, you always question when they say, "Oh, I have old books," and well, okay, old doesn't mean rare, old doesn't mean
Yeah. That
expensive.
and right. And what is an old book to them is to you
Right.
and I not an old book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife is a librarian. It's funny. She runs a library on the island. And she always said, I mean, she's like, yeah, I know it's not old. I mean, it's old, but that doesn't mean it's worth anything. I know you've told me that. I'm like, yeah, okay. But you also, you have, if you're going to, I think, be successful as a bookseller, in my opinion, you've got to really cultivate tact because, people, I mean, they come in with these things and it's precious to them or it came down from their father, their grandfather, their grandmother, whatever. And so it's, you've really got to be tactful with how you interact with people if, because they could come back with something else later. That's fabulous.
I also think probably you're probably a little bit more tactful than I am because of where you are, though. You're with a different type of community,
Yeah.
people who have lived in these towns for generations, and I'm in South Florida where
Yeah. Yeah. It's just
they come
constantly
they come
shifting.
and go
Yeah.
every day,
Yeah.
but so do the books. I literally get calls every day. I can go on house calls every day if I had the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. But you got to sort. I mean, you got to do the work ahead of time to make sure you're not
It's
driving
such a
out there.
transient area.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. And yeah, this is much more reputation laden. I guess
Mhm.
there'd be a word for it around here. Plus, I also, with the community that where we live on the island, it has a big summer community, and it, people with big dollars. And so for many years I had a shop on the island where I did new and used books and some rare. And we do a lot of book signings. So I got to know all of the summer folks. And
Mhm.
there's folks in the winters there in New York, Boston, DC, and Palm Beach. And so there was some element of the carriage trade, which I never, kid growing up on a farm in Wisconsin, I'm not hello, I know about the carriage trade. But I learned quickly and have been able to not only buy material and stuff I can't afford, take on consignment from some of these folks who don't really know what they have,
Right.
but also, have had some really good sales to people who are buying, an important gift for graduation. They want a first edition of Huck Finn or something like that. And so that's been really kind of neat. So the thing I like about the business is that I can I can go deep on something for a while and then I can shift.
So do you enjoy the consignment end of it? Do you do a lot of it?
I don't do as much as I used to. I have a retired dealer here and who had a shop in the area, and he's moved into a retirement community. And he's kept all this stuff kind of on his shelf, the stuff that he couldn't
Right.
sell, and he bulked out his inventory. And I've got a small shelf just to the left of me now, probably about 2 dozen books that he's brought in that I'm going to take on consignment.
Yeah.
And because I don't know, they're not stuff necessarily in my area. And quite frankly, cash wise, I mean, I oftentimes will do consignment just because I don't have the cash to lay out the money for something to sit on the shelf if I'm not
Right.
sure about it. Um, but I have a lot less consignment than I used to. For years I had a client who had built a major collection of it was the largest collection in private hands of the history of physics. And he had started, and he was a McKinsey consultant who retired, did very well. And he decided he was going to collect history of science. So he started very broadly, and he's after a little while, I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do physics.
Way too
So he
broad.
studied physics, and his niche in the history of physics was he was collecting not books necessarily, but he was collecting where the first time that a theory was published.
Okay.
So he would go and buy a whole bunch of serials. Like he bought runs of the philosophical transactions of the Royal
Right.
Society of
Yeah.
London.
And academic journals
Yep.
and
And then he would not have the article extracted and bound. He would have the volume rebound in leather. And so he had beautiful collection. He gave me an option to try and sell it. I tried to sell it. I talked to MIT. I talked to the Huntington. I couldn't do it. He ended up selling it to the I want to say it's American Physical Society, which is the Association of Physicists based in Maryland, for a tidy sum. And then he had been collecting in the meantime. He started up a new collection. He'd been working on it for a while on climate change.
wow, that's interesting.
And he built that up to the point, and he sold that to Peter Harrington. He sold that to Palm Harrington in London. They then centered that around another collection they had of Darwin and other things, and they did this big. They did an exhibition, and there is an online conversation, and this gentleman's name is David Wenner, with David about the collection, how he built it, and all of that. So I had a lot of that on consignment. I don't any longer, but and you have these finds.
Mhm.
So there was the 1776 volume of the Royal Society of London publication of the articles, and in that was the first time that it was reported out on how Captain Cook treated scurvy when they were going around the world. And so that was cool. And a guy named
That's a
Pringle.
lot. That's a lot of different subjects right there.
I
That's amazing.
know. So this
Yeah.
guy named Pringle wrote this article about he was writing about he was publishing or introducing Captain Cook's letter, and it was
Mhm.
published in an edition. And this is one of these finds of a lifetime. And I'm going through and I'm collating it, making sure everything's right. And I get to the back and there's something bound in, and I'm like, oh, this is odd. I open it up, and it's about a 42-page pamphlet published by the Royal Society of London, and it was Pringle's book on treating scurvy,
1776.
1776. And I'm like, that's interesting. And I'm going through and I'm like, well, okay. So I went online. I thought this is interesting. I don't know anything about it, but we'll look it up. And there were 2 copies available. There was one in Australia, and Bill Reese had one in Connecticut.
Okay.
One was priced at 42,000, and the other was priced at 35. And so I called up the client and I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? And so, you know, it was great. And we ended up selling it. But, you know, you never know. I mean,
And
it's just like Robert Caro talks about when he does research, you have to turn every page. And the thing about book selling that I found out, you got to look at every book.
Yeah. When you say it was bound inside the book, explain that a little deeper
It
for
was bound in, so these were in library bindings. They had been purchased from a library. They were in library bindings. They had been discards. And the Royal Society published not only that, you know, the journal, but they published that book. And it probably was on a subscription basis. When it came to the library, they probably came at the same time. They were put together. They were bound together in a library binding.
Oh, I see. Oh, they were melded together like it was one
Yep. They were
volume.
just bound together. It was just bound in the back.
But it's almost like you were meant to find it. I mean, I don't know, you know, not everybody would have discovered that.
Yeah. I got lucky, and I'm sure, and you know, you always think about all the, you know, what have we missed?
I don't want to have that conversation with you. We don't want that
But
conversation.
it's okay, you know, there's always another day. You know, there's
Yeah.
always another day.
Well, and the books are everywhere. You're gonna,
Oh yeah.
yeah. I mean, I very rarely look back just because of how busy the business is.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What sort of changes have you noticed? Let's say during COVID and going forward now, going into 2025 as we're entering it in a 6 more months. What type of changes are you seeing in the book world? Buying, selling?
You know, I don't know about your business because I don't sell. I know you do a lot of eBay. I don't. I've this year, in the past since January, usually, you know, there's always that bump up. You do pretty well online until, you know, Christmas, 1st of January, and then people worry about their taxes, and then it kind of goes down for January, and then it starts to creep up in February. I found the year very flat from about January
This
through
past year
probably
you're
within the
talking
last
about.
month.
This past year.
Yeah.
Okay.
For me.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, for me. And I was still listing things. I haven't changed the type of material I'm listing. Have no idea. Just seemed flat. Now it's starting to pop up again. Usually August goes down, you know, because people are on vacation and all that.
Yeah.
Now it's popped up. Here's the odd thing. My least successful online listing site is a Libris. Used to be Biblio, now it's a Libris. In the last, because I was gone over the weekend, so I tried to shut everything off. Since yesterday, I have had 3 orders on a Libris. I maybe have one a month. No idea. So I used to try and figure it out. I mean, I even did the thing with going on Google and buying and AdWords and all that, trying to get people directed to things. I just keep plugging away, cataloging things, putting stuff online. But I do think taking everything offline once in a while and then reloading helps.
Yeah. Let me add, this is a great point to take a turn a little bit. In my Patreon group, we always talk about the other book sites, Biblio, Abe, Ars Libris. And you're saying that maybe you sold one a month on Ars Libris. So this is going to help a lot of people on this question. What would be the benefit of even putting the time and effort into putting it on that platform?
Well, you know, for me, it doesn't take, it's nothing for me because when I upload my listings, they go to everyone.
Yeah, it's automatic. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, for me, it's just like if I can cover as many bases as possible.
Okay.
My biggest selling site is Abe.
Okay.
And it always has been.
Right.
And you know, and I do sell my second best is probably my own website. I'll sell stuff. I tend to sell higher price things on my website than on Abe.
Right. I did see one great book on, it's probably on your personal site, but I saw a signed owner's copy. You know what I'm talking about, of E.B. White's personal home Bible.
Yeah. So for years,
I need to know that story.
So for years, I've sold stuff for the family.
Okay.
So E.B. White lived in Brooklyn, Maine, which is north and east of here. And it's all kind of a weird circuitous thing. So when I had my bookstore on the island and we sold new books, his granddaughter Martha White did a book called E.B. White on Dogs, and she came out and did a book signing for me and I got to know Martha. Martha manages the literary business for E.B. and Catherine's material, his wife. And I used to do a service, and I may get back into it again. I used to do a service. I would work with people. So what I found with the folks that I have interacted with in the summers, who have, there's a lot of wealth there. Oftentimes they have libraries in their houses that are inherited, and they kind of come down and down. And for them, it's furniture. They don't know what they have.
Right.
And I've had clients who then have somebody has passed away, and they've come in and had to do somebody's done an appraisal, and they're like, holy moly, we have this book worth this much money. I wish we'd known that. Or I wish we had given it to my niece. She's really into, Greek architecture.
Right.
And then we wouldn't, we would be paying all the inheritance taxes on the appraised value, which, they can afford it. But so I started doing a thing I called assessments, not appraisals. I don't do appraisals. I don't feel that I have the training, according to the IRS, for doing them. And so I started to do assessments for people where I would go in and I would go through their library. I'd pull highlights. I'd say, you've got this many books. You've got these things that are really significant. This is what you're looking at in a value that would be retail. That doesn't mean you're going to get it, but this is kind of to give you a context. And I did that, and it was really interesting. And so Martha, I did it for Martha's mom, Aline White, and she's Joel White's widow. Joel White was the only son of E.B. and Catherine White. He actually started a boatyard in Brooklyn. He was a boat designer. And I did an assessment for them and went through everything and said, this is it. And about a year later, they said, oh, would you mind? We've got some material. So what they've been doing is distributing things to the grandchildren. So every grandkid or every child, as many as they had, has a signed copy of Charlotte's Web or a signed copy of Stuart Little. So that goes up. But nobody wanted the Bible. So like, we're not religious people. Who's going to want it? I guess we should sell it. And I'm like, well, okay, And it's just this unique thing. And the interesting thing about that Bible, when you look at it, is that E.B. was not religious. He was more like, if Thoreau was a religion, then that was E.B.'s religion.
Right.
And so he wrote in the Bible, I don't know if you read in the inscription, but he presented the Bible to himself when he bought it. And he bought it, and Martha told me the story. In 1975, her grandmother had some heart issues, and she was sure that that Catherine said, E.B., you got to buy a Bible, so when I die, you can write my name in it and record it. And it's like, okay, whatever. He goes to Ellsworth, he buys a Bible, he inscribes it to himself. And the only thing in that Bible is her death is recorded in 1978. That's it.
My initial thought is, as a collector, where is the E.B. White collector not buying this?
I know. It's interesting.
We all love OOAK. This is one of a kind.
Yeah.
There's nothing else out there, and this is a part of the family history.
Right. And here's another one of the kind that I have from them that it's a book called now I can't think of the name of it, but anyway, the author is Sterling Finney.
Okay.
Sterling Finney was the pseudonym that E.B. White used in the New Yorker when he wrote copy for a number of ads. The Life and Times of Sterling Finney. He wrote a copy for a number of ads, and he took mannequins that he went and borrowed from Wanamaker's department store in New York, and he would photograph them, and then he'd write these vignettes about them, and then they collected them into a volume that they were going to present to like salespeople when they were trying to sell ads and things like that. I think they said they printed maybe it was either 100 copies or 1,000. I don't remember. It was privately published. It was published by the New Yorker. Harold Ross hated the idea, the founder of the New Yorker. And so they didn't really do it. So what I have in my inventory from the family on consignment from them is a copy of the book, which is also E.B.'s first book, if you look at the bibliography. But E.B. has inscribed it to himself. So it's Dear E.B., big long inscription, and he says signed it Sterling Finney.
That is incredible.
I know.
That's an incredible story.
I know. And I've had it for a while, longer than I thought I should.
This is going to turn into an E.B. White lecture, but how often did he write under a pseudonym?
Just that one time.
Just that one time.
Just that one time.
That what a great, strange E.B. White
Yeah.
story.
Oh, he was hilarious, you know, and I did have a set. I've sold them now, but I had a set of all I think it was 5 foreign editions of Charlotte's Web. One was in Persian, one was in Turkish, Dutch, German, maybe Swedish. The one that's and he'd signed them all.
Mhm.
And the one that was in Turkish, he signed as E.M. Oyat, which is how E.B. White is written or pronounced
Right.
in Turkish. So, you know, he was just, God, he
Clever.
was,
He was a clever man. Very
yeah,
clever man.
so funny and so clever. And it was just, it's been interesting. I mean, you know, and he was a huge fan of Henry David Thoreau. And when I did the assessment, so Aline, when Joel died in the late 90s, of course, he had inherited everything of his parents. So she had a lot of EB's library. Most of EB's material went to Cornell, where he went to college.
Okay. Yeah, that was my
And
next question of where his
yeah,
papers
so
were.
she had a lot of family material, but he must have had 6 different kinds of copies of Walden,
Okay.
and you know, but he had a first there. She still owns. There was a first, and I
Right.
think and he signed it. And I have some other stuff that he has signed over the years, including things that he had when he was in college in the early. See, he was born in 1899, so in the early part of the century that was signed Elwyn Brooks, you know, before it became EB. So
Right.
it's just, yeah, you know, you just get a sense. It's interesting, and I'm sure you've seen this too. If you look at a library that somebody's built, how much you get a sense of that person.
Clearly. Yeah.
You really begin to understand to an extent where they were coming from, and you see, you know, sometimes you can kind of divine the personality.
How many copies did the family have of Strunk and White?
I know, you know, I don't know, but
Boxes?
so here's what's interesting. they I have seen, and I don't think it went to the university. I've seen his copy of Strunk
Wow. Okay.
that
Before.
he annotated
Yeah.
for first writing the article for the New Yorker and for then
Right.
revising it and updating it. And it was funny, before E.B. White, I used to read that like once a year.
Everybody did. Everyone who was a book lover read Strunk and White. That
Yeah.
was on every required reading list
Yeah.
in the 70s, 80s,
Yeah.
and 90s. It was
And
every required,
it
man.
should still be on all those reading lists.
Oh, that's another conversation for
I
another
know. I
time.
know.
Oh,
Keep
that's
it
another, yeah.
keep
So,
it concise.
yeah. Are you hopeful going forward in the book business? Um, Based on what you see, what you feel, and also for the conversations you have with your other bookseller friends. I'm sure a lot of them are ABAA members.
Yeah, yeah, I am. You know, I think there was a shakeout. There are a lot fewer open shops.
Hmm.
Those of us that do have open shops, though, have good traffic.
Okay.
People are, you know, people. It's so funny. People are just appreciative
Yeah.
of having open shops. They're like, oh, so love coming in here. Oh, you know, and they may buy a $10 book, but whatever.
Right.
They might come back. Um, I think we are optimistic. I think the thing, like with any business and with any shifting industry, I think for a long time, booksellers were just used to doing things. You had an open shop, you maybe published some lists, you did some book fairs. That doesn't cut it anymore. You've got to be on top of things. You don't have to sell online, but honestly, why aren't you? I
Mhm.
love the fact that I'm making money when I'm sleeping. When I
You,
get up and there's
boy,
a couple of orders that come in.
you could be me. I mean, we say the same things. I mean, as a former high school teacher, when I wake up now and I've made my old teaching salary while I was sleeping,
Yeah,
it is the greatest gift
yeah, yeah,
that books can give
yeah.
you.
And you get to go out and you get to track stuff down. I mean, I think that you just need to be cognizant. I mean, the thing that will always drive me up a wall is open shops that are by chance or appointment. To me, that's not an open shop. Um, I also feel that I'm a bookseller and I shouldn't be this way, but I always feel if I'm going to make an appointment to see somebody's stuff, that means I feel obligated that I need to buy something.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's like there's always those barriers. And I not all book dealers are grumpy, but there are some out there. And I sometimes wonder how some booksellers had a career with some of the interactions I've had with them, and just like, wow, that's not great customer service. But I come from a customer service background. I worked in gift shops, I worked for Land's End, things like that when I was in college. And for me, it's just about, the thing about book selling is that I just love making people happy, because they're like, oh my God, I've been looking for this forever, or oh, I had no idea this existed.
Yeah,
Uh,
you are, or we are the middleman between that surprise intervention of seeing a book and that person who wants to buy it.
yeah,
We're the middleman for the lost book. And
absolutely.
I think we need to take great pride in that. There are, I remember when I got into the business, everyone was complaining about eBay and Amazon, and no, who is going to buy a book on the internet? And
Yeah.
and now that it's a way of life,
Mhm.
but there are still booksellers, as you mentioned, that still fight the technology game. And
Yeah.
why, as booksellers, why would you not want to sell globally?
Right. Well, and I think too, and I think that, so many people, it's very hard. And there was I've done lots of different things over the years, and being a bookseller on an island off the coast of Maine is not the most lucrative thing as far as seasonality. And for a couple of years, I worked for a nonprofit here on the mainland called the Island Institute, and I ran their business practice, small business practice, helping people on the coast and on the islands with small business startups and things like that. And, what I always would tell people is, do what you're really good at and contract the other stuff out. Now, that doesn't mean that you have
Great
to have a
point.
huge payroll, but if you don't want to do the online stuff and all that,
Right.
find a high school kid. Just make sure the descriptions are good. I mean, it's not brain surgery to do this, but everybody, we get in these ruts, and we think, oh, we can't do this, oh, we can't do that. And there are people that can help you with it. And
Challenge and grow and
oh, yeah.
expand.
Yeah.
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 Amazing.
So, I mean, and I've had employees. I had at one point, I had 3 different locations, because we had bought the inventory of a large bookstore, and I had a location on the island that was, my primary one. And then I had one that was really more or less storage, but then I had somebody staff it in the summers. And then I had a shop over here, and it got to be too many plates in the air.
Right.
And payroll and all that. And it's not that I wouldn't hire anybody or to have somebody working for me, but right now it's just nice to be my own person. And
Sure.
it's such a business that right now I'm 5 days a week, July and August. I'll come over 6 days a week, but I can take a week off in
Right.
March.
Yeah. You
Or I can
govern
take
your own destiny now. You govern your own destiny.
Yeah.
We're all 3 shops in Maine.
They were all just right in the middle. 2 were
Okay.
on the island, and
Okay.
then I had one here in Belfast.
Yeah.
But it was just too many plates in the
Sure.
air at that time. And that was back in I had the shop here 2010, 2012. So I had, 2 shops for a few years. And then I consolidated. We bought a building next to our house on the island and consolidated in 2011
Right.
and 20. And then that's where we had
It
the
just
shop.
shows your excitement as a bookseller. You wanted to be peppered everywhere all over
Oh
Maine.
yeah. Well, I'm lucky I don't have a lot of shelf space, and I don't have a lot of storage, because I would have way too many books.
Your wife
And
wouldn't be a librarian. She'd be working with you
That's
side by
that's right. Yeah. Oh my God, have we moved boxes? I would love to know how many tons of books any
Yeah.
bookseller has moved in his lifetime or her lifetime. But so my back's still okay. I
Yeah.
just have to be careful.
You
But
have a
that's what I
good
always tell
pattern.
people.
Yeah.
Prime bookselling, prime bookseller is strong back, weak mind. You just
Yeah.
keep
People
plugging
don't
along.
realize how much moving of books we do day in, day out.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like 15% of my energy every day, at least 15%, is just me moving books from
Yep.
one part of the house to another part of the
Yeah.
house, or to the shipping part of the house,
Yep.
or for the listing part of the house. But it's just moving
Yeah.
books.
It's just constant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just trying, I've got a gap in the shelves. I'm like, gosh, what can I put there? But I don't really have any subject matter that it should kind of butt up against. So
Right.
I'm still going to just be open for now.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I'm gonna close this up with one more question. I don't want to take too much of your time. Um, the show is called Destination Unknown.
Yeah.
Part of the fun for me is not knowing who I'm going to interview week to week, just like I'm interviewing you now.
Yeah.
So where are you sending me off to?
I'm going to send you to my good friend Nick Cook in Richmond, Virginia,
Okay.
who owns Black Swan Books.
Beautiful.
And Nick and I have been colleagues, and his wife Ellen, and we've shared booths at the Boston Fair and in New York. And Nick has an interesting path as well. And
Well,
so I'll leave it at that.
yeah.
But I'm going to pass you on to Nick, and I'm looking forward to seeing that interview.
I appreciate it. I feel like I've made a friend here. I'm probably going to be emailing you some questions after this interview.
Excellent.
I feel like affinity to how you speak about books. It's how I
Good.
feel about books.
Well, I'm glad. Well, I've enjoyed this.
And I thank you. I thank you for giving me an hour of your time during the day.
Happy to.
Have a great day, and I'll talk to you very soon.
Great. You do go out and sell some books.
Every day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.